But yeah, a lot of new names here, and here we go. We're getting underway.
We are getting underway. Our first game of the day. I cannot wait because you talked about that tournament way back when in October. It's been a few months now. But my question is, how has the meta developed? How have things changed? Are the strategies that we've seen back then still going to be viable? How have recent updates changed what these players are going to do? That's my big question, because I've sort of sat back and said, I'm not going to try and snoop too hard on what these top players are doing. I want it to be a bit of a surprise to me as well. Obviously, doing research into when different strategies are coming out, that's always important. But I also want to see, I kind of want to be surprised. Like the chat, I want to see what everybody's up to.
Yeah, and to kind of elaborate on that point as well, in the game, it's a mechanic where you can see other people's builds. You can actually go in the top 100, top 500, and you can kind of browse. You can see what other people are doing. A lot of the top players, they hide their builds. They don't necessarily show other people what's going on. So I'm curious, are we going to see something we haven't seen before? And I'm almost certain we are, at least in the course of the circuit. I'm very curious about that to see what kind of strategies we see. But obviously, just to explain kind of the early game a little bit in auto chess, it's pretty standard across all auto battlers. You kind of go with what the game presents to you, and then the way you play from there kind of defines how well you do in the game. So what I'm really looking out for in the early game is there is the RNG factor. Okay, a lot of people talk about that. It's like, oh, how much luck is involved? There is slight luck involved. They call it high rolling in this game, which is you just high roll, you get lucky, and you get all the pieces you need. There is an element of that here. So that's what I'm looking out for. Who's going to be high rolling? Who's going to be picking up those 2 stars really quickly? And then are they going to turn that into a big winning streak, and who's gonna take advantage of the losing streak? So there's a lot of stuff to explain as this goes along, but those are a few things I'm looking for in the early game.
For sure. And I'm pulling up the scoreboard now, taking a look at some of the different strategies, some of the different builds we're seeing coming out. A lot of goblins catching my eye so far. I know that's a pretty popular build coming in right now. We'll see how that transitions, because there's a lot of those low common level pieces that you can just sort of pick up. This goblin mech strat we're seeing coming out right now. And we're seeing Prodigy building out right now. Now that we're actually getting into sort of the fight phase, we'll get to see how these different builds are starting to stack up against one another.
Yeah, and already on our screen we're seeing, or at least, yeah, I'm looking at the same thing here. I'm also in the game spectating on my own, but the goblin gamble, right? Where goblins can be very strong in the early game. Getting those synergies put together, Heaven Bomber, there's a lot of AoE potential. You have to get kind of lucky and just kind of pick them up. But also you have to kind of hope that no other players are going for the same strategy. If multiple players are going for the goblin gamble, it's not really going to work out. That's why they call it a gamble, and because it's very focused on early game success and early game winning streaks. So it doesn't scale as well as the game goes along. But
yeah,
that's exactly what we're seeing right here. Some goblins getting picked up. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be my big question mark for sure, is how are these builds going to be able to scale, transition into the late game? That's sort of one of the big consistencies among auto battlers, is sort of that big question mark. How is this going to work? How is this going to continue to be able to carry me to a victory? But, you know, obviously all these players, it is the mobile open. They're here playing on mobile. And I think one of the great things about this game is the experience is pretty darn seamless, whether or not you're playing on PC or mobile here. Do you expect there's going to be any huge changes for these players transitioning to mobile?
Okay, that's a really good question, man. As someone who has played both the PC and the mobile version quite a bit, there's some parts of the mobile version I prefer, some parts of the PC version that I prefer. So I think, and I'm open to people's thoughts on this. I'm gonna be looking at the chat too. But what I'm looking, a critical part of auto chess is when you have a big bank and you're looking for a particular piece. What you have to do is you have to move all your pieces into the board so you have room on your bench to cycle through and roll down and pick up the pieces you want. That is technically a little harder on mobile. I feel like it's a little bit harder on a phone. So it's like things like that I'm looking out for, but overall, I don't think it's too big of a difference, at least compared to other games that have both mobile and PC platforms.
Yeah, actually, I think for me, honestly, I was so impressed by the port to mobile when I first played it, because you're right, other than like a couple of those tiny little things, it basically felt identical to me, which is fantastic. The idea that I could just transition back and forth, no problem between the two. But of course, for these players now, they've been competing on mobile for the last like 2 months. They are veterans. They are pros at this point. So I'm expecting sort of any of those things to be sort of weeded out, any of those particular issues. And we are seeing some players down here towards the bottom. I think just sort of keeping these losing streaks alive a little bit longer here to just continue to build up that bank of gold ones who are already starting to lose, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, the economic factor is very important in the auto battler genre. And we can already see a disparity there. If you look at the top of our list of players on the left, the players near the top, a little bit less econ than the players at the bottom. And that's because of those losing streaks. Get you a little bit extra gold advantage. And the idea there is to build that losing streak, really build your economy, focus on getting the extra income. Of course, you're given one extra gold per 10. So getting that extra income and then kind of developing a stronger strategy as the game goes along. Now, the other side of that coin is going for a really heavy win streak in the beginning, which means your econ's going to be a little bit lower. You're really focused on building out the pieces that you have on the board, and that's the economic game in the auto battler genre and in auto chess. Do you go for those winning streaks? Do you go to those losing streaks? Because if you're in between that, it's definitely not ideal. Like you win and then you lose and then you win and then you lose. You're getting no economic advantage whatsoever. So we're seeing Silent and Betty right now really picking up their econ and sticking to those losing streaks.
Yeah, down towards the bottom, they sort of identified, look, I'm not getting the pieces that I'm needing here. I'm not in a position where this is going to work out for me. So I'm just going to, the term I've heard in the past, open fort. I'm not sure if that translates as well here to auto chess as well. But you're just sort of letting things open. Leaving things totally not even to chance. You're not even risking that somebody else is pulling the same strategy is going to let off. You're just going to lose every single time. But again, upwards to 50 coins. That's really it. That's the big thing here. That's really want to get yourself maximum economic value. You're getting that 5 interest every single time. And from there, you can, do I want to keep myself above that? Do I usually sit between 30 and 50 is generally where I've tended to see these top players play. But we'll see if that's changed since the last time I've seen a tournament.
Yeah, and again, that might depend a little on what the game gives you. Some players might stay lower econ because they're getting all the pieces they need early on. Other players might be forced into developing their economy first because they're just not getting the pieces they need, and they need time to develop the strategy that they're going for. So lots of fascinating stuff for sure when it comes to the economy in this game. And interestingly, we have one player who's like still in single digits on the left-hand side of the screen there, GG Norm, with only 8 to his name, now going down to 5. So he's staying low on the econ, and he's got a hunter strategy going here, which I've been playing around with a little recently. You can really scale a lot of damage early on and really get that damage output going. But I've had trouble transitioning into the late game using hunter, but. So we'll see what he ends up doing. Right now, we have 2 players with a win streak. Bet Yao on a 6 streak, Jared on a 5 streak, and looking really quick on what they have going on. Goblin Gamble from our player in the lead. That's something we talked about when the game was starting, looking out for players doing that, and it's certainly paying off for Bet Yao right now. He's got those goblins mixed in. But we can see he has a pretty diverse group of units. In fact, did he just sell? I don't know if he just sold one of his goblins. No, he's still pursuing the goblins, but sometimes you can transition away from the goblin gamble as well. Bet Yao going into spirits, which is quite a strong build. Meanwhile, Jared, our player in second place, guess what? He's also going for a bit of the goblin plays. So that pretty much speaks towards what we were talking about earlier, how strong goblins can be in the early game. Our top 2 players in the lobby right now have the goblins as part of their composition.
Yeah, the question now becomes, how is that going to pay off for them as the game continues? Some of these other strategies that scale really well going in. I mean, Knights, of course, is another one of these builds that really comes to mind. But if it's not necessarily as prevalent in the meta right now, that's going to be a big question mark. And of course, you do have to stack up a decent amount of them for that passive to really give you that longevity that you're looking for in one of these matches. But you know what? We've taken a look at the top of the leaderboard. I want to go back down towards the bottom of the leaderboard right now. I want to see what's going on. Silent, who's down here right at the bottom. I think finally maybe going to start putting some troops in here. Has been open fort for quite a while. We'll see how that goes. And I also want to look towards how these players are leveling, because of course you spend gold not only to acquire these pieces, put on your board, put in play, but also to purchase experience that you can level up. The higher you level, of course, the more troops you can play, the more units you can play. So that's definitely something to be keeping an eye out here, because we're already seeing some early leveling. We have Silent level 5. We have Jared, who just went to 7. My goodness, that's a bit of a spread.
It's a good point. And I think that pretty much tells us he's really trying to hold on to his winning streak right now. He does not want to give that up. So he's like, I'm going to spend some money here. I'm going to go up to level 7. And he's the only guy at level 7 right now. So he's just trying to get some really easy wins so he can keep that winning streak alive. And of course, he's looking forward to facing off against Betyao, both of them now with on pretty crazy winning streaks. But yeah, that's a good point. Really paying attention to who's leveling when. And of course, that is going to affect your economy. It can be quite expensive to level up, and of course, it gets more expensive as the game goes along.
Yeah, and again, knowing sort of when to hit these break points or leveling just one experience behind that you auto level going into the next round, little things like that, just the maximization of economy, keeping yourself over these over these thresholds like the on every single 10 with the interest, and then of course balancing, picking up the pieces that you just need to get. I'm not really spending a whole lot of time now talking about these builds. We're touching on it a little bit, but we're still early days of this game. Players can still shift if different pieces come their way. There's still a lot of variability I expect that we're going to see over the course of this game. As we're watching Zath right now, having a little bit of a tough time here going up against his opponent. And, oh my, that's probably not what Zath was looking for here at this point, because he's sort of in this top 4 mark, but he was on a little bit of a back and forth, winning some, losing some, but they've been pretty close.
Yeah, it's funny. Zath also has some goblins that he's using. And if you guys watching are paying attention, there's 2 other players who are using goblins also. And those are 2 players who are number 1 and number 2 in the lobby right now. So that does not spell very good things for Zath if he's got a goblin heavy comp when the top 2 players in the lobby are going goblins as well. So I don't know what's going to happen here. This is pretty strange. Like 3 players going pretty heavy into goblins, Betyao, Jared, and Zath. And yeah, it looks like they're all sticking to it as well. So either one of these players is going to sell and try to transition, but I don't think if they each knew that was the case, that all of them would be pursuing it, because it's obvious there's less pieces to work with if you have other players in the lobby going for what you're going for. So I think Zath, he probably needs to find a way to transition right now, because he is going goblins, but the top 2 players in the lobby are going goblins. So very curious.
Yeah, could cause a little bit of an issue there, a little bit of a problem, because as you mentioned before, of course, all these players are drawing from the same pool of pieces. There's only so many pieces up for grabs. And of course, as they transition, you can see this number on the screen right in the middle there. Level 5 is the example being presented here. This is the percentage chance that you get from getting everything from common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary, etc. That's the chance you have of actually picking up those pieces. So as you level up, trying to say go for something like a 3-star, I don't know, maybe a Heaven Bomber here, that's going to get harder and harder, because you're going to get less and less chances of getting those tier 1, those common pieces. So knowing when you want to level, where you want to stay, and just, you talked about before, when you want to just sit in high roll, look towards these level 3s, that's going to be my big question mark as well. Who is going to potentially try and play for that early?
Dude, by the way, I've just noticed something. Every player, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but every player except our bottom 2 players has a 2-star goblin.
Mm-hmm.
That's so think about that for a second. Chat,
so easy to get.
Every player has a 2-star goblin, and what's funny here is goblins can be so strong. I wonder if part of this, and again, I'm curious about people's thoughts, especially you guys in the chat, but is part of this trying to keep other people from going crazy with goblins? It's is that part of the meta now, where if you're playing auto chess, you're like, you know what, maybe I should have a 2-star goblin here just to make sure no one goes crazy. We might be seeing something like here, where 6 players have a 2-star goblin in play. It's interesting, man. Interesting stuff.
And of course, because this is our first game, and there may be some people who are less familiar to auto chess, less familiar to the auto battler genre, of course, we're going to be going over a decent amount of these sort of core fundamental mechanics of the game. But of course, as these goes along, as our viewers, and as we get more and more familiar with what these players are doing, we'll start to deep dive into the strategy a little bit more, because something we haven't even really talked about yet is the whole idea of items and item builds and all that kind of stuff that comes in. Of course, you have this random chance to pick up certain item components and bigger pieces as the game goes on. How you build those out, of course, to synergize with whatever build you're getting is so critical, so important to make sure that you're getting the absolute most value out of these units, out of these pieces. So I'm also excited. We're going to talk about it more and more, how players are building these key carries, these key tanks as well in the front, and what they're looking for here as these games are going to go on.
Yeah, and there's a slight RNG factor there too, as well as with any game with items. You have your your creep rounds, you have your neutral rounds where you're picking up those items, and depending on what you're building, you kind of have to hope for the items you're looking for, or you adjust what you're doing based on the items you're getting. So that's quite a good point, and we'll definitely keep an eye on that as everything goes along. Speaking of items, though, why not look at our player who is leading the lobby, Betyao, on 11 streak. He's not lost yet. He's got his water spirit loaded up with quite a few items, trying to make the water spirit super tanky. Water spirit can be super strong. It's a lot of AoE with his special, and if you make him super tanky with some armor and some HP, as we're seeing, it can lead to some pretty scary stuff and a lot of damage output from that water spirit. So that's one way we're seeing items utilized here by our player in the lead, Betyao, with the very strong water spirit.
Yeah, going for that wave dash. The second he gets across there, it's or wave slash, I should say. It's just like, well, there's the massive amount of AoE damage. Good luck to you, friend. Not super ideal there. But also interesting to note that we are seeing also some assassin play coming in. And this is something that's super interesting to me. I really think assassins are something that's super cool. We've actually seen two players, both Prodigy and Jared, going 6 assassin right now, which is pretty darn impressive to get that out and sort of commit to that build already. But of course, one of the sort of downsides with assassins, sometimes you still need some units up at the front to take that initial bit of damage, because those assassins are going to jump into the back, are going to try and do their work. So you do have to have a more well-rounded build in some situations to sort of give them a little bit more time to play with and do that really top damage. But it's really interesting to note there, we have actually seen Betyao lose for the first time so far this game. The streak is at an end. My goodness.
Can't win them all, or can you? Obviously, very difficult to do. There are some strategies where just in the idea, in the concept of an 8-player lobby, the longer you can stay at the top of the lobby, the better chance you have of moving on. As we can see, Silent is already down to 31 health, right as Betyao is losing his first game. So I'm not too much of a betting man, but there's a good chance, no pun intended, that Betyao will finish ahead of Silent, right? If you simplify it like that, that's a good reason to really try to stay on top of the lobby as much as possible. But there are some risks if you sacrifice your economy. If you don't have a game plan, you can tumble out in a way. So Betyao did well at first, but that's not a guarantee that you'll succeed as the game goes along. So we'll have to see if we can keep it up. And I'm also very curious to see if any of our losing streakers are going to be able to come back and be more competitive in this lobby. Because you can open Fort all day long, but then if you end up at 31 health like Silent at this point in the game, you're not going to be too happy. So a big part of the auto chess is how do you handle those losing streaks, and what are you kind of turning that into? Can you hold on? And because it can lead to a disaster if you're going for these losing streaks, then you find yourself with no HP. So we'll keep an eye on those players right now at the bottom of the lobby. It's getting to be a pretty critical time as we're not too far away from seeing one player knocked out.
Yeah, we are seeing Silent now. He's committed to this feathered assassin druid build, so going to be able to get those 3 stars out. Yeah,
he's super low econ too.
Yeah, he rolled down. He was sitting above 30 for quite a while there. He sort of committed. He's like, look, because one of the things people need to remember about any auto battler is just like gold's a resource, just like your pieces are a resource. Health is a resource. You can spend it early if you want to get those lose streaks. You're basically trading HP for gold. That's basically what the premise is. But now that's a resource that you spent. That's a resource that you've got to hold on to, and you're going to trade things around. Now you're going to look to spend more of that economy that you built for yourself, as you can see there. Because again, we talk about this. You get this income, you get interest, you get victories, you get win streaks. But you got to keep in mind how all these pieces are different, are sort of fitting together.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there with Silent rolling down. Guess what? He's got a 3-star Warpwood Sage. He's got Druids going. I think he's still looking for oh no, he has Unicorn on the bench, so he's got 4 Druid, which can be huge. So he is low on the HP, 31 HP, but 3-star Warpwood Sage, pretty strong. Like, that is a pretty tanky guy. If he can get the damage around that, that could turn into good news for him. So I wouldn't write Silent off just yet, even though he's last in the lobby.
No, I mean, and this is sort of what we're talking about here, the idea that making sure you get these synergies together, buff up your alliances. That's a massive difference here, because we are seeing the ability to just get him all the way up here. You got the leech seed is going to be going. He's just healing himself so much, just sustaining, surviving. He's eventually going to go down here, but my goodness, this is hilarious to watch. I mean, well,
it's working. He's got the Shining Assassin helping him out at the top, so
yeah,
this is going to work out. Well, actually, it's going to be a draw because the battle phase is over.
Oh my goodness.
There you go.
That was.
We need to type something in the chat for a draw. What's the number we type?
323
or a letter.
Or a letter. D for
a D
draw.
for draw. Yeah.
Because I want to keep that in mind. That was against Betyao. That was against the player who, up until a couple rounds ago, hadn't lost. So you've asked the question, Axel Toss. You think Silent stabilized? I think he has.
It's a good start, and for him now, what he definitely wants is a winning streak. Like, he wants to turn that into a winning streak, no doubt about it. Let's start getting that econ in the other direction, and he's got that really strong orbit stage. We just saw it; it outlasted that entire round. Tanky boy right there. So the question is, will he have the damage around it to supplement himself? And actually, he just got destroyed on a board. So silent but deadly. He might be dead soon because he just got wiped in that. He just faced off against, I believe, it looks like it was Benny, also running a water spirit. So
it's interesting because I have GG Norm. Because I have GG Norm who's facing up against Silence board as well, and he only barely was able to get the win there. So it might be too little too late here, as we're now starting to see players, a lot of them getting up into this 9 range in terms of overall level. Silent, Prodigy still yet to level here, as well as Jared, who's actually been able to maintain first place here while still only on level 8. You know, he's running these 6 assassins. He's got spirits as well as those Marines coming in here, and having that additional MR is going to make a big difference over these long, drawn-out fights.
The Thunder Spirit, the Thunder Spirit can be very strong. At least when I run into it in the game, it can be super strong, and we see Jared running that. So I'm curious to see how often the Thunder Spirit is utilized and what kind of builds it's incorporated in. Interesting to see Jared doing just well with that. A Water Spirit for him also doing good things. And also that means that Betyao, which was our player, remember when Betyao was in first? You remember that? It wasn't too long ago. It wasn't too long ago at all. And now he's second to last. So it's kind of, we were talking about it and it happened. I mean, he was in first for a long time, but he tumbled away. And I'm kind of trying to think about that. It could mean that the lobby is super strong. I don't know if it speaks towards the Goblin play where he was really trying to go heavily in the Goblins, and we had pretty much every other player in the lobby also picking up some Goblins. So maybe that has hurt him a little bit. Doesn't really have any 3 stars going on. Meanwhile, Silent taken out. He's going to be our first player knocked. And what's interesting there is that his players are going to be added back to the pool. So I don't know if any other players are running Druid. Yeah, Prodigy at least is running Druid. So it could be an advantage for another player who's going for that Druid comp, might be able to pick up those pieces that are left behind. But we're getting into crunch time here. Our player who is in first place, now in second to last, potentially on the verge of being knocked out. 3 loss streak in a row. Meanwhile, our top 5 are pretty close to each other. Look at that. 53, 52, 51, 46, 45. That's a pretty close lobby. I'm no mathematician.
I don't think you need to be. Our top 3 are within 3. That's how close that is. But I want to jump on board here with Betyao. I need to know what went wrong here. That's so interesting to me because we had this really strong Goblin start with the mechs. Talk about this now, transitioning into the Kier a little bit. The Warlock a touch, going to get some additional lifesteal and some buffs going on. Really important, of course, with your Venomancer. Going to be running that as his carry. So keep an eye on that. But I think this is so interesting because we asked a question. Are these Goblins going to fall off? What is going to happen with that? How are they going to transition? And I think we're kind of getting our answer.
Yeah. As time goes along in the game, that question is definitely being answered. We have a Venomancer chat a Venomancer fan in the chat, I should say. Will's saying that the Venomancer from Betyao will help him prevail. Well, we're going to keep an eye on that. I'm definitely nervous for Betyao right now, considering he has lost so much HP in such a small amount of time. It feels like he's fallen off a cliff and he's scrambling to stay alive. But yeah, this is super close. We have to. This is hard to watch at this point. There's a lot of action to check out because of how close this lobby is.
But one good thing here coming in for Betyao is he was just able to get his Cuirass. That's actually pretty huge. This is a really strong, important carry item. You're going to see have a big impact, especially on these fights as they continue to go on over and over again. And I think that might start to be maybe the switch might start to turn things around here, as we are seeing the composition of Bet Yao looking a whole lot better against this board now. And wow, a solid victory here for him that time around. That looked a little bit better.
Yeah, and can the comeback happen? A part of that too, obviously dropping from first to seventh. There's losing streaks in there, right? So there is a slight economic advantage you could have as well. So that can be something he can use to bring it back. So definitely keep an eye on that. And I'm watching where you're taking us here, to looking at all these players. It's like, who do you really want to watch here? Because it's all so close. Benny now at the top. Jared, remember, he was just at the top, and now he's dropped down to 5th. These guys are just trading places so quickly.
What I tend to like to do is I tend to like to watch the players who are close to getting knocked out. I want to see sort of what, not necessarily their death throws or what their comebacks do tend to look like. That's usually what excites me. I want to see exactly how these games are going to go down. And of course, we have a hard carry Abyssal Crawler coming in now. For Prodigy here. Oof. He's going to be relying on this constantly buffing attack. Yeah, once that attack speed starts to ramp up, it gets absolutely scary. Like the Spiral Crawler, 7% attack, can stack up to 25 attack speed, can stack up to 25% time. By the time you get to the end, you get a couple of those going. Oh my goodness, this Abyssal Crawler is one of those really solid carries, especially when you're getting the additional bonus coming in with that Assassin synergy. That's really massive as well. So I think, again, for some of these players, they're going to start to be able to go toe-to-toe with those guys we saw up at the top. It feels like they're finally starting to stabilize, despite the fact Prodigy is still level 8. Zath is level 10. Let's see what Zath's doing, because clearly something's going right.
Zath on a 5 winning streak at the top of the lobby. His economy's just fine. As you mentioned, level 10. Looks like he's got quite a few warriors on the board. Not up to 9. It looks like he's at 6 warrior. And continuing his winning here. I mentioned earlier, I gave a shout out to Wills172 in the chat, who's now famous in the chat apparently. Nice. The Venomancer also being utilized by Zath, so at least a couple players going with the Venomancer.
Yeah, I mean, one of just these incredibly strong units, and of course. So got to get that Barbaric Cuirass. It's just so important. Just having that attack speed, be able to not only increase, reduce, all that stuff. It's just really, really important to have. But Jared, let's jump back aboard with Jared, because it seems like Betio and it seems like Prodigy have stabilized a little bit, but Jared has still been tumbling down.
He's just at the top, dude.
Exactly. This is just so close. I would expect nothing less from our playoffs, Axel Toss.
This is auto chess. Not to pull a line out of the Rocket League Shogun playbook. This is auto chess. It's crazy. We have seen so many swaps, not only in place, but from first to last to first to last, so on and so forth. Craziness. We have a lot of positions being exchanged. Okay, it looks like Prodigy getting taken out. Jared is the next one out, just like that, leaving us with 5 players in the lobby. GG Norm on 14 HP with 0 in the bank. His econ is not, he's on his last life here, desperately trying to stay in this game. So it's getting down to crunch time, absolutely, with Zath. Zath still at the top, now on a 7 streak.
Yeah, an interesting sort of a flex into the Agarsis Hunter now for GG Norm. Again, we've sort of seen the players adapting the strategies over the course of the game. It seems like this has sort of been what he settled on. But you mentioned this before. Hunters can be great, but keeping those key units alive can sometimes just be so difficult. And I think that's maybe what GG Norm's been experiencing here a little bit. However, he was able to get some of those key units into this, so we'll see how this goes. But they're just so squishy, even with that Siren. I mean, that's obviously a huge, and that ult, that changes the game.
Yeah, and there's a couple things happening there. With the Agarsis, of course, with 4 of them, all enemies have -6 armor. So if you combining that with the Hunter, with all friendly Hunters having an additional 45 base attack damage and plus 45% chance to pierce through evasion if you have 6 of them. So that's exactly what's going on here, which is pretty cool comp here for GG Norm. It's something I've tried before, so we'll see if it works out. Something that is glaringly missing is any 3-star units.
Yep.
Also, I feel like his units might be a little clumped together in the back left. I'd be a little bit afraid of AoE from the enemy. But let's see if GG Norm can stay alive here, and gets cleaned up down to 2 HP, so just barely staying alive. I feel like he got a little unfortunate, not really getting any 3 stars, not really finding the exact units he needs. But look at that, he just outlasted Betyao. So that's the thing with
Wow.
auto battlers. If you can just hang on by a thread, that still might mean you outplace someone else. So very critical to make good decisions as the game goes along, and don't give up.
Can I talk about the idea of the transition here? We talked about this a few times. We've mentioned, you know, the build you start off with doesn't necessarily mean that's the build you end with. We started off with like 6 goblins, and we have now finished on 4 different builds, completely different builds to finish this up. We've even got some divinity in play here as well. A very, very cool to see how these players have been able to transition going through this. And now we're seeing these battles right at the end. They are absolutely frantic. But it looks like GG Norm was able to pull off the victory there, just keeping that dwarf sniper in the back, keeping him safe. Of course, he does have the Maelstrom as well, going to be getting that additional attack speed, getting those lightning bounces, which can really do some decent work here. And you mentioned before how he has all these hunters stacked up together. I think a lot of it was, of course, just to deal with maybe all the assassins that we were going to see potentially coming in. There were a lot of those assassins for quite a while, so if you can keep them sort of grouped up and get your tanks up there to try and help out, that could go a long way. But now, Benny, 10 HP. Norm, 2 HP. And Zath still up there to the talk. Joseph as well, 9 and 5 win streaks, respectively. That's amazing.
I think it's safe to say that this is a 2-horse race for the top 2 right now. Zath and Joseph battling for 1 and 2. Benny and GG Norm battling to stay, battling for 3rd. Is pretty much what's happening here. I don't see Benny or GG Norm overcoming Zath and Joseph, but we'll see. Anything can happen. GG Norm, let's see if he... Oh, GG Norm, look at that. He stays alive, just barely outlasting Benny. And that's 2 players that GG Norm has passed. Betyao and Benny on extremely low HP. So look at, I mean, really making this Agarsis Hunter composition work, which is... I mean, I go for something like this a lot in my games. I like Druid as well. So it's cool to see this working so well. I'm like, I know people in the chat are probably taking some notes as well. These are the builds we're looking for. What are these players using to really get top 3, to get top 2? While we see a 6 mage comp coming out from Joseph and Zath, warrior, very warrior heavy. So pretty different builds across the board here. And it's Zath's game to lose right now. 10 win streak, 46 HP. Oh. He's got quite a few 3 stars working.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was just watching that Venomancer, man. That was just terrifying. That was the big difference maker there. I mean, getting one of these carries that you're able to stack up. He's not too far off actually getting that. Was he actually close to getting a potential 3 now? He's still got a little ways on that one. The Doom, though, the Doom Arbiter is actually getting up there. He's pretty darn close to being able to make that a 3-star as well. But just look at the items that he's been able to get on his Venomancer, between the Axe of Fear, between everything else, between the Cuirass. I'm just gonna click on this and we'll just watch it go to town here. Of course, not on this round, but you know what I mean. The next time he faces up against a person, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, hey, go to town on the Black Dragon King. No problem there. And looking at, I kind of want to keep an eye. We can stay on Zath to see that Venomancer go to work in the next round, but I'm just taking a quick peek at Joseph. He's got a few dragons on the board, so he's going for a dragon mage composition, and he's still got a level 2 water spirit also, which isn't. I don't feel like that's doing too much for him, so he might be thinking about swapping that out at some point. But going for the really mage heavy build, he's got the flame wizard in there, which can just be super strong with the damage output. So have to see what happens. I think I like what you're saying though. The Venomancer super strong from Zath, but there we see the AoE damage coming out from Joseph. So trying to bring it back, but Zath just too strong. And look at that, the 3-star Venom is just insane. The 3-star Venomancer, or the poison swarm there with just scaling ridiculously. And just coming up with so much damage. Just really impressive stuff here from Zath. A lot of his units working for him very well.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to note here, because one of the problems that you get with, there's the 3. That's it. I'm going to call it now. That's going to be all she wrote. Oh my. The 3-star Venomancer. with this build. He's stacked. Oh my goodness. We're just going to watch this go. I don't think Joseph has much of a hope here. Part of the problem with Warriors oftentimes is that they just don't have the damage backed up behind them. But when you are able to get these key items, when you're able to get your troops lined up, oh my goodness, it's just wild. And we'll see, maybe if there's a way that Joseph can hold on, but just watch the carry potential. Oh me, oh my. And that is going to be it. That's going to be all she wrote. GG, game number 1. Zaf pulled out the victory there. Again, he was the player I mentioned before, one of the ones I was looking at when I was trying to learn auto chess. I said, you know, who do I want to take a look at? He streams on Twitch. And I said, yeah, this guy seems pretty good. And clearly I had some good instincts because he takes the win in our very first game.
Yeah, quite a few things working for him there. Going for the warrior composition definitely worked out for him. It felt like not a lot of other players were going for warrior, which is maybe why he was able to scale that so well as the game went along. Obviously, he had a 3-star pirate captain at the end, also alongside the 3-star Venomancer. So that's a part of auto chess as well as, and I'm still thinking about it too, as far as hiding information from your opponent. How do you really do that? Like, can you hide what you're going for so that other players aren't picking up the pieces that you need? Is there a way to do that? So I'm really looking out for that. Like, what are these players going for? What build? And what other players are going for the same build? And how are they reacting to each other? So there, Zath picked a really nice build that he might have disguised a little bit earlier on in the game, going very goblin heavy, and it worked out.
Yeah, he was able to get the pieces as he needed them, have a beautiful transition, and worked out well for him. But let's take a look at our Xperia highlights from that very first game. Axel Toss walks through because there were a lot of really fun moments over the course of this. But I think the biggest, and we talked about this, is the idea that just because the build is this one you start with, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how you're going to finish.
Totally, and I think a characteristic of this game was just how flippity-floppity the lobby was. It's so back and forth. There we see mage compositions really coming into play. We see 2 water spirits on the map here, and we can see them just jumping around everywhere, trying to get that AoE damage done. And it was really interesting just seeing all these different strategies unfold. And that's an answer that's a question we're trying to answer. What are these guys going for? As we see just the absolute strength of the Warriors here. And the AoE, that's why it's so important to really pay attention to where you're placing those units. How are they going to engage? How can you mitigate the AoE from your opponent? Because as these battles happen, as the game goes along, there's a ton of firepower on the screen. And there we see the Warriors once again. There's no hope for the enemy when those guys swoop in. We see some defensive efforts there, trying to freeze the opponent. That's not going to work either. Warriors are so strong.
Yeah, and I think it really just goes. I was going to say, I think it just really goes to show like how important it is to identify like what units, what pieces are going to be your key carries, and to itemize them correctly. Because part of the big difference that we saw over the course of this game was I mean, as we see, especially in this last one, you can just see the Venomancer in the corner. Once it finally does get into range, it is able to decimate. And a lot of that had to do with how well